In the Gospel, we have the Lord making reference to the figure of Naaman. It was an outsider who was healed, and he has before him not outsiders at all, but the professionals, and they get the message, and they are not amused. What would the Lord say to us? The abuse of grace among the professionals in his service. And in general, we who have received the fullness of the sacramental life are oftentimes those who are most refractory to its effects. Familiarity breeds contempt. I remember in Baptist days how the Thursday before the first Sunday of the month had the prayer meeting of preparation for Holy Communion. The sacraments were not valid or even there. But it doesn't mean that grace wasn't there, for the Lord came there to the souls where they were at, and reliving the Last Supper and the Passion of the Saviour with interiority and love, he would draw close to the soul. We go in and out, glibly and casually, of the maximum on earth. Oftentimes arriving out of breath and going out and starting to talk in the sacristy or in church, while we are tabernacles of the Most High. But that extends also to the day. I remember discovering early on in the monastic life how in silence and emptiness inside, the Holy Communion was felt for hours, and one was aware of the inhabiting presence, and one dialogued with it, especially when there was perpetual silence and no other dialogue around. Living the event, unpacking the grace, absorbing our God. But then one can see, if we place human beings above our Saviour immediately after communion in the attention given, that will extend itself also tendentially to the attitude towards the day. It will be not, as it were, an extension of the Holy Communion. It will be just another compartment, quite different, in which things quite contrary may enter in. For as when one kneels before the Blessed Sacrament, the tabernacle, the monstrance, one is aware of the massive presence of God and of his angels around, and one comes on tiptoe into that burning bush. So, if one is a tabernacle oneself, one is tendentially orientated towards not a huge amount of explosive noise, but one wants to go inwards. The whole adventure of the contemplative life is that, inwards rather than outwards, in dynamic. But then things will follow. One will not use certain words. one will speak in a warm and charitable way, for Jesus is in the midst. If one finds that in the day it's quite the contrary that's happening, and that sharp edges are easily coming in, and that bad words are allowed, and abuse of the will to do what is contrary to the divine will, deliberately and willingly, then there is no continuity, and the communion is not having its effect. And so it is that we who are exposed a lot to the maximum need to look carefully. Is the discontinuity? For it is not pleasing to the Lord to come and rest upon the tongue that later in the day will be employed to produce unpleasant words and sounds, and to abuse his name, that of his Father, to use language which should not be used by the throne of the Most High. The tongue must be in continuity. And so it is that if there is bad language in the day, we have made a break. We are no longer in communion at that point. We are in disunion. And we noticed that in the healing of Naaman, it was when the will was submitted in humility, at last, through prompting by a servant, that he was healed. And that is the supreme sacrifice, the will. We may do many things for the Lord, create even much beauty, but the will is the instrument of praise. Let us ask for the grace just to will the divine will in all things without exception, including our acceptance of the moment that Providence gives us here and now. Lord, you are present in your will here, and that is where you are awaiting me. Let me wed your will in every detail without exception. To